to the almost end of summer broadcast.
Yes, almost end of summer. And boy, it's gone by fast.
Well, yeah, I can't already believe we're almost, what is it? The week of August? Anyway.
Well, it's August the 22nd of the,
certainly seems to be a year flying by again.
well, it is gone by. And by the way, this is the 25th edition of the Bob and Tom Show on the BORDERPOL Journal.
Well, I'm glad it's not the 25th edition of the Dog and Pony Show.
Well, maybe we'd get more viewers if we had dogs and ponies in the background. I don't know.
Who knows? Who knows? But
well, you have to remind the people to hit the like button and the subscribe button, because that's how we find out who's actually interested in what we have to say.
yeah. And we would certainly enjoy knowing that we have more than just you and me.
That's right. That's right. We're still waiting for some of our so-called guests to show up, but I guess summertime is not a good time for folks to come in. By the way, one of our listeners, viewers, wanted to know how your holiday was, believe it or not.
Well, I was thinking about that, I don't want to sound like we were out pioneering by any stretch of the imagination. It was a remote place, yes. There are telephone connections if you have internet, because there is power. There is, I guess, marine band radio to, if there's an emergency that you're not going to be left stranded. But it was actually very, very nice for a week to be a place where cell telephone doesn't ring, and you can just disconnect and enjoy yourself and watch nature and fish and swim and do all the kind of things that I guess we used to do and maybe I forgot to do. So I enjoyed it. And I can't tell people that it's for everybody, but you ever have a chance to do it, might be worthwhile.
So did you catch some fish?
Personally, no, but there were a lot of people there that it was kind of like a mini fishing derby, and there's some good sized fish caught, and it was more for the getting together of friends and families that was worthwhile. Yeah.
And you were recharged.
Yeah, and we managed to make it home before the roads were closed with the fires that are burning through the middle of the province. So yeah.
Right. Did you see any of was there smoke and whatever that came down your way?
Yeah, there was some smoke in the around the mountains. Certainly coming down, we noticed some smoke, but not the flames or anything. And that was good. We went through I guess it was through Revelstoke a couple of years ago, and the whole side was on fire, and it was rather scary. The raw power and the winds and the sounds. Something will stay with you, I think.
Saw on the news this morning that the fires in Yellowknife are being mitigated by some serious downpours of rain, which is
well, we certainly need that. As long as we don't get the lightning that comes with it to ignite more. I think the last count here in BC, we've have I think it's 375 fires going right now. I think 16 of which are not in control, and I think there's about 17 of note, which usually means it's around buildings and in cities or towns. It's going to take a while to recover from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at the fires that took place, well, I guess it's been now 10 days ago or so or more in Maui. That has really put a point on how devastating these things can be.
Very. Yes. We had that happen a couple of years ago with the village of Lytton, and
oh yes,
It's still, I mean, we drove by there. There's still a big, huge fence along the road. You can't get into the village. Mind you, there's nothing there anyway. And I understand that the village is on whatever number of people were in there. They're on evacuation alert again. So it just seems. What's the old saying? When it rains, it pours.
Yeah.
Uh,
There's a website you can go to that's from the U.S. NOAA website.
mhm.
You can look at the fires from space. But peculiarly, if you look at the fires from space, they seem to be concentrated in northern Canada as opposed to south of the 49th parallel. There's and you look at the Rocky Mountain range, it's all forests and mountains and trees and etc. Why is it so prevalent in Canada yet not to the same degree? Not to say that there aren't any fires. You can see them on the map, but it just doesn't appear to be as intense. Um,
Yeah, it's another one of those mysteries of life, I guess.
yeah, well, it's I find it interesting that the question of how did these fires start seem to get short shrift in the news. Um, yes, we're all adults, understand what happens when there's a thunderstorm and lightning hits. But if we take the case of the fire in Hawaii, it indications allegedly are that the fire was started by a transformer or wires of the utility company that set fire to grasses that should have been dealt with by the community for years that were tinder dry, and then the perfect storm of wind, fire, and lack of water because someone also seemed to be at the tap and didn't turn it on. Like a whole, it was a combination of things that happened, but in
Yeah.
fact, it was essentially man-made. The
Well,
fire.
there's that, and the issue too. I think of conspiracy theory or not. I don't know. Uh, we've got stories now talking about, well, the electric company was too busy trying to go greens and they weren't looking after the infrastructure. And I guess it gets down to a point where we need to have somebody to blame or somebody to focus energies on. I don't know. I always referred to them as the Monday morning quarterbacks. And, if I only had the numbers yesterday that came up on the lotto today, I'd be rich, but
Sure.
I
Yeah.
guess the nature thing, I don't know. You're looking for somebody to,
Well, we've spoken about this many times about things that are important today aren't important tomorrow. I mean, we have a very short sort of, we have the attention span of a goldfish on so many of these things collectively as a society.
Mhm.
And it seems that combined with the seemingly uninspiring leadership that we have across the political spectrum
Oh,
these days, that combination of disinterest and folks who really are not equipped to be leaders in the sense of inspiring the population, because that's what we have.
yeah, I mean,
That's,
it is. You pointed out pre-production, the diatribe from a London newspaper on our illustrious leader.
Telegraph.
Yeah, and you read it, and I guess if you take things with a tongue in cheek, it's okay. But if I was reading that and it was trying to take it as a gospel, I'd be looking for a warm water and a razor blade. But have we lost that much faith in politics, the courts?
Well,
I
we
don't.
talked about the perfect storm in Maui causing all that damage. maybe we have the perfect storm in our society at the moment, causing that kind of damage,
Mhm.
to our psyche and our confidence, generally speaking. I mean, when you have an economy that's failing, now economies fail. Nature doesn't do that. Science doesn't do that. People do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you lose faith in who? The leadership, the bankers, the corporate folks. Uh, then you look at who caused wars aren't caused by nature. They're not caused by climate. They're caused by people. So
Mhm.
when you look at what's happening around the world with the various conflicts, again, the folks who are uh, profiting from this, they're okay, but the
Mhm. They're,
millions who are victims, they seem to be like, a secondary thought to the media. I
yeah.
mean, either this is we're old enough to remember, for example, Vietnam, and every night on TV they had people out there, journalists, showing what was going on.
Mhm.
And eventually, those truths ended with the war ending because there was a anti-war movement that said, "This is crazy. What is going on here?" And it ended. I don't see any journalists on the nightly news anywhere talking about Ukraine in the trenches. We all you're getting is press releases from the Russians or from the Ukrainians, and that's supposed to take that for a grain of salt, or the gospel, depending on your position. And then the so-called Western media, which is basically just parroting these
Tidbits.
announcements, are suggesting quite the opposite to what's happening on the ground. If you look at independent media, it's a horror show. People, hundreds of thousands of deaths, but hey, not a big deal, according to and the so-called leadership again, seems to think this is not a big deal.
Yeah.
So you become lethargic. I mean, we're not, but a lot of the people go, you know what? I don't care. This doesn't impact me, and it doesn't. It's to vast,
Mhm.
really, but we become so blasé about this packaging of news from the mainstream media, as it's called. That in order for you to really get a picture of what's going on, you got to
Yeah.
go elsewhere. I mean, look at this business with, well, again, talk about leadership in this country. We talked about also in pre-production. The government of Canada basically tells Facebook, Meta, whatever, and all the other providers of news on the internet to take a hike, right? Bill C-18, now
Yeah.
Law C-18.
Yeah.
So now there's a fire taking that needs to be reported on. And you were saying in pre-production, why would anybody go to Facebook to find out where there's a fire?
Well, I'm certainly not a computer genius, but even I know if you want, to our neighbors to the south, if you want news, you can go to a thing called CNN.com or FoxNews.com. Up here in Canada, you can go to CBC.ca, you can go to CTV.ca, you can go to global.com, and those are the supposed news factories. Now, the fact that they may feed into Meta, Facebook, whatever, why is there an issue? Like the news is there. And I guess it goes back, you've got a government that has caused the problem, and now the government is seeing a partial result of that problem and are trying, again, goes back to like the people in Maui, and you have to have somebody to focus your anger on. And I guess that's what the government is doing now. They're focusing on Meta or Facebook for a problem that they really caused.
Well, they'd have very poor introspection abilities. That's for sure. You're right. Someone else is to blame. Someone
Mm,
else is to blame for the increase in interest rates on housing. Someone else is to blame
yeah,
for high gas prices. Someone else is to blame for shootings in cities where they have absolute bans on guns. And we could run the list
oh
for
yeah.
much more time than really is necessary here. But
Well,
it's
and I guess that goes, not that we're in the business to endorse people, but we were talking a bit about it before. There's the guy by the name of Oliver Anthony that has written a song, um, "Rich Men North of Richmond,"
yes.
and apparently has gone viral. And you were saying that he's been approached to make a record, and he's said, "No, I wrote it because I was annoyed, or I'm angry, or I've identified something that's wrong, and I wanted to express it." Um,
Well, he's tapped into a
a
vein
raw nerve.
in a raw nerve, whatever, of certainly North American society, and I assume that the same to some extent would be in Europe. That is to say, G20 countries or whatever. But just in terms of the United States and Canada, so many people live from paycheck to paycheck. So many people have seen their cities become homeless encampments.
Mm.
The I guess the past due date is. I'm trying to think of a way to an analogy for the leadership. Both in both the U.S. and Canada, we have a leadership across the board, frankly, in charge right now that's past its due date. People get tired. I mean, in this country, people are tired of this crowd. They've been in power for 8 years, and it doesn't matter which government would be. After 8 years, that song that they play gets boring. It's like top 40 radio used to be. You had the hit parade back in the day, and you listen to the same song, and after 6 weeks, somebody else was number one, and you became a golden oldie. You know,
Well,
so
we were looking at that on, and again, just watching some of the media last night because there was nothing better to do. And after the first set of commercial ad breaks, I wanted to turn it off because the next commercial ad breaks was the same ads that we had just watched 10 minutes previous. And I guess that's what this is going. The governments of the day, which should read the label, they want to get rid of up here in Canada the best before date. And the smart ones bow out, and the ones that think that they're going to live forever are just ignoring it, and it just continues on. And I guess that's where Mr. Anthony got his inspiration from. Is that the right word? Inspiration to write
well,
this?
yeah, inspiration. Yes. Um, I'm just trying to, go back to what the Telegraph said, because we're talking about, you know, what is the loss here of interest. And that the Telegraph's article starts off by saying that the Canadians have fallen out of love with Trudeau, and that the shines come off of a career that sometimes defied political gravity. And they go on to say that Trudeau mania, the nation is suffering from Trudeau fatigue. And that's really the whole business of looking at past their due date. This guy and his group is past their due date because there's disillusionment, of the people, because not just economic factors but social factors are getting into this, and you
Hmm.
can't deny. You were telling me that it costs $2, over $2 a liter to buy gas, right? In your
Yeah.
neck of the woods. Well,
Yeah.
here it's a buck 71 or two now. Well, if you're on a fixed income, or even if you're not on you can't absorb those hits.
No, no.
without having to look for someone to blame, because you didn't decide to pay 30 or 40 cents a liter more for gas. Someone else decided that. Again, it wasn't nature that did it. Human beings decided on this. You're not the one who created a housing crisis. The sorry, but the people who are the levers of power, along with the bankers, you remember back in 2008 when they were selling derivatives instruments, selling the banks caused that recession where they were selling stuff they didn't own.
Yeah.
2 or 3 or 4 times over, the same mortgage was held by different people. Well,
yeah.
So
And
that was caused by humans, not caused by some, other aliens didn't land here and start messing around with stuff.
well, yeah, and just trying to figure out. That's, I guess, at $2.10 for a liter gasoline here for the American viewers, that would be the equivalent of about $5.65 a gallon down there.
Yeah.
I think that's what they're paying in California. California is very, very similar to what Canada is, both in population and in green policies.
Yes.
Yeah, people are. You're right. People are just getting fed up, and what was it? The YouTube that you had forwarded the other day by Neil Oliver, a presenter in the UK.
Yeah.
Well worth listening to. 15 minutes and bang on just about everything.
Yeah, it would be grand if we could play some of that here, but copyright issues as well as time would constrain us. But yeah, if people want to look this up, he's on GB News in the UK. He's a Scottish fellow. And if you go to YouTube, you can find the actual video.
Video.
Yeah, and it's all and it's I'm trying to remember what the actual title of that was. Maybe while we're giving it some thought, I'll look it up here. But it was clear from his monologue, I guess is what it was, that it just came off his tongue with such ease that it seems that the actual foundation of the anger is so well entrenched that he didn't have to think about it. I mean, he just goes off. And one of the key things for me that I remembered from his monologue was talking about Imran Khan, the famous cricket player, who was the darling of the media, both as a cricket player, and then he went on to marry a socialite and was very popular. He got to be, in the end, the prime minister of Pakistan. Then all of a sudden, he falls out of favor with the elites in, I guess, the G7, particularly out of Washington and London, because he dared to be neutral on the war in Ukraine. And all of a sudden, this guy is actually in jail at the moment. Now, there's probably a whole bunch of other minor little things going on there, but point of the matter is this fellow goes from hero to zero simply because he wasn't going along with the mainstream, the global mainstream, I guess to call it that. And that's a very sad reflection of our times, and that's what the Scottish fellow on GB News used as one of the examples of how we're going off the rails as a caring, as a knowing, and as a scientific society, because this is really nuts what's happening.
And he also talked, I wondered where the term gaslighting came from.
Oh, yeah.
He had a very, very good segment of his video on that, and put things in very good perspective. And again, he's got a very thick Scottish brogue, which you may have to listen to the video a couple of times, or simply put some closed captioning on. But bang on, spot on a lot of things, and yeah, I guess it just goes to say, you know, maybe we've been forerunners of this for a while, because we've been complaining a lot about governmental issues and court issues, and maybe other people are just starting to find the same bee in their bonnet.
Yeah, yeah, you are right. I think the thing that we have to be very cognizant of is that the very thing you and I are doing here, as well as far more famous folks like Joe Rogan and others who have millions of followers, this has got to be a real problem for the bunch that's running the show right now. And hence the complaint by our illustrious leader in Canada that the Meta isn't doing their job after he told them not to do their job. So it's interesting, and that's why when you brought up the business of the gaslighting, we've been and if gaslighting comes from the Ingrid Bergman movie back in the 40s. Ingrid, yeah, where the husband is trying to make the wife think she's going crazy by changing things in the house, like turning down the gas lights. And because they did in the movie takes place in an era where the lighting in the house was with gas lights. So you would turn down the gas, make it dimmer in the house, lighting wise, and then the woman would say, it's getting dimmer in here. And he'd say, no, you're imagining things. You're losing your mind. It's perfectly bright. And that's you're right. That's very apropos about what's gas. We've been gaslit here now for literally years on so many issues.
Very much so. Yeah.
By this bunch who have essentially gone past their best date. Okay. And it's again, going back to the article from the Telegraph, that the gaslighting is been going on for a while, because there's all sorts of issues like voluntary euthanasia reforms. The rest of the world thinks we're killing people off who might be depressed, just because it's cheaper to do that than to have real mental illness issues dealt with in a medical way and put the money towards it. And instead, here's an idea. If you're really depressed, we'll give you a shot and you'll be gone. And now I know I'm making light of this and shrinking it down to very narrow parameters, but we're being watched by others in the world and thinking, what is wrong with these people? And so,
well, yeah, I mean, it's an issue that I hope I never have to come to terms with. But yeah, there's two sides of the coin. I guess it's the Canadian abortion issue, the Roe versus Wade, that the United States is going through. It evokes very strong emotions on both sides, and I don't know if we'd ever reach a consensus or an agreement on the issues like that are very, very touch button sensitive issues. And maybe it's better that we don't. I think it's good that we have discussions about them. But again, with our leadership up here, and it seems to be you're either for us or you're against us. And if you're against us, then it really doesn't matter what you say. You're just wrong.
Well, for the longest time, certainly here, we've been sort of famous for being polite. And a civil society. Sadly, I think we were seen that way. I don't think we're seen that way anymore. I think internationally we're seen as a bit of a joke on a number of fronts, whether it's the issue of Ukraine and our support, which is a joke. And then we don't want to even be open about what it's all about, or whether it's how we deal with our indigenous people. The promise is made to them. It's always not to be a joke.
Yeah.
And the list is lengthy. This is not a diatribe against this. It's just that this is a tired, worn out outfit that needs to be replaced with something that is a little brighter, shinier, and more positive. I think that we've lost our sense of enthusiasm, or a sense of optimism in this country, because it's everything is run down, worn out,
Yeah.
unkempt. We're not aspiring anymore to go to the top, or aspiring to drive down to the bottom by making everything the same. Well, that's pretty boring.
Yeah. Yeah.
The rush to the bottom seems to be what was and this other thing.
Well,
Sorry, go
and
ahead.
it's no, it's just it's the not just the rush to the bottom. It's the fact we used to have a fabulous infrastructure. I mean, you could take some trains and see wonderful parts of the country. I don't know if the rail systems are as good as they once were. I certainly know that the road system is not what it was. Um, there seems to be more of an interest in this country in particular of spending our hard-earned people's tax dollars on other countries rather than on fixing up our own and fixing up our own issues of, as you mentioned, mental health, housing, medical. The list seems almost endless on the things that we could be putting our funding towards. So
Right. And some of the sophomoric ideas that are being presented by this worn out, tired group, just on things like immigration, for example. The logic currently by this reconstituted cabinet, same old deck of cards shuffled, but we bring in even more people to Canada because that's how we'll fix the problem of housing. Really? How does that work? If there's nowhere for them to live, there are no jobs for them to take, how does more of the same fix the problem? Well, of course, they don't talk about that issue. And in fact, the comment was made by the dear leader here that housing is not a priority of the federal government. It's a provincial or municipal thing. Really? Well, then, so how does this work? You basically fill up the lifeboat with people and it sinks. Yeah, well, it's some other Navy's problem to save those people from drowning.
yeah, yeah.
That's a cheap analogy there.
I we keep hoping that somewhere some adult is going to stand up or some Lone Ranger, some Batman, some Superman.
Yeah, but you don't have
Somewhere along the line, somebody's got to be
where
looking.
okay, where is this person? Where is he or she hiding out? Because we
Yeah,
need some good people like now to come
yeah,
forward,
yeah, yeah,
um, and offer not just talk but action.
yeah,
Einstein said that if you do the same thing over and over again, it just shows you're stupid, because you're going to end up with the same result or something akin to that. Okay. I'm paraphrasing, but this is what's happening here now with this crowd, the same old, and they dress it up as new. It's not. It's this, there's ideologies that have been prevalent here now for 8 years. And by the way, it's all downstream from our pals to the south here as well. Okay. So, as we were saying earlier, what happens there 2 weeks ago ends up being in Canada 2 weeks from now because it's just copycat stuff. Like I'm sure there'll be a country singer that'll come up with a song in Canada. It will be like the fellow in the US, and it'll hit the same nerve because
yeah,
eventually
yeah,
our economies are in the toilet the same way. So, but we need some young people who are not ideologues, who have that moral compass you were referring to in an earlier discussion, which seems to be mislaid. Um,
Yeah. Maybe it's flip poles. I don't know.
could be, but you know, when you talk about we spend more money on some foreign issue than we do about some domestic issue, you know, that's that you know, this is not to say that you know
No.
we don't care about people in other parts of the world, but charity begins at home. Sorry.
Well, if we've got young kids that are not being able to do well in school because they're not getting breakfast or lunch, you know, there's something wrong with the system.
You betcha. Exactly. So, you know, we're not saying anything new here. I guess we're
No.
just reinforcing what probably millions of other people are
Thinking, saying,
saying. But perhaps in our little way here, we will push the agenda forward a bit and get people to at least talk about it and
yeah,
look to alternatives in terms of the policies and the folks who might turn this around.
yeah,
We have some ideas. Maybe we'll talk about that in the next issue of the journal about some of the things that might be able to ameliorate the problems of homelessness and the economy and so forth. We're just two old guys just you know talking over the fence here about stuff that you know happens. But
yeah,
you know sometimes that's a whole lot more valuable than some of the experts that we come to rely on. Not to be too narcissistic about it, but common sense may have died in their circles, but I think it's still around.
well, people, maybe that's the hope. People are still looking for common sense to be resurrected and take hold again.
Yeah, and I'm let's end on an optimistic note. They're out there somewhere.
Oh, yeah,
Those
somewhere.
those folks, and they'll. What's that? Someone's coming. All right. Well,
I see we're almost at the end of time. So,
we
yeah,
are. We are.
on a positive note, going back to the singers, do you actually think that the way our economy and our world is going, that there will be a country singer that writes a song about the electric car that leaves his owner?
No. No. That's a we'll begin with that next time.
Well, yes, okay.
Okay, Bob.
Have a good time.
See you next week.
You bet.